All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll go ahead and open up the Community Development Agency meeting and call it to order. The time is 7 o'clock. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please vote for roll call. Six council members are present, Mayor.
Item 1 on the agenda is to consider authorizing Community Development Agency chairperson to sign certificate of completion for Nebraska irrigated seeds.
Thank you, Mayor. Travis Jaycott, City Attorney. This is a request to authorize a certificate of completion for Nebraska irrigated seeds redevelopment project. This request came in late last week. They were intending to close with certain creditors last week. And so they requested that we authorize the certificate of completion as of September 7th. The certificate of completion in the packet was the one that was attached to the redevelopment agreement. I've spoken with the council for both the developer and the proposed creditor for the project. And this is all good to go from my end. So I'll take any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Seeing none, any comments from the public on this item? Okay. Seeing no comments, any additional comments from council? If there are none, I would take a motion. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Councilwoman Lathrop.
Second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to adjourn the Community Development Agency meeting. Councilman Vaughn.
So moved.
Councilman Dinkins.
Second.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. I'll go ahead and open up the city council regular meeting. Again, time is 7:02. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Six members are present, Mayor.
Okay, next is mayor's comments tonight. I would like to just remind Fremont about the Fremont Transit Program. This got started. We started our first ride September 7th, and the Fremont Transit Program is a demand response door-to-door transit program, which will provide transportation in Fremont. This service will be available to the general public, older adults, and persons with disabilities. All vans are wheelchair accessible. The Fremont Transit Program may be utilized for medical appointments, business appointments, shopping, other trips. Individuals wishing to use the Fremont Transit Program may call our office to schedule a ride. This is 402-459-2845. And we cannot guarantee rides and recommend that riders have a backup plan in case we cannot, in case there is a delay. But we have been operating very successfully over the past week. We've been averaging around 15 rides per day. Which has been pretty good. So again, we're really excited about this service. I want to thank the city staff, elected officials, and everyone that helped get this service going. And hopefully it's a great service to the community. And we really want to do this well and serve the community well. So that concludes my comments for this evening. Item 1 would be a motion to adopt the current agenda for the September 12th, 2023 regular meeting. I do have one change to the agenda. I, on the request of staff, would like to move item 22. This would be ahead of 18, or so right before unfinished business. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Again, this would be item 22, right before unfinished business. If there are none, I would take a motion to amend the agenda. Councilman Vaughn,
Make the motion to amend the agenda.
Councilman Sukram,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Yeah, I'd take a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councilman Sukram,
I'll make that motion.
is there a second? Councilman Von Baron,
I'll second it.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on to public hearings is item 2, a resolution 2023-214 to approve a conditional use permit for a childcare center on property located at 445 East Sixth Street.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, Jennifer Jam, Planning Director. This is a request by Myra Catherine Hale for a childcare facility at 445 East Sixth Street. It is located in the downtown commercial district in which a childcare facility is a conditional use. There is a city parking lot located to the southwest of this site. A commercial used to be a bank immediately west of the site, a parking lot for the Salem Church that's to the north. The church and their child care center and their parking lot is to the north. They also have an overflow parking lot to the west. This provides a really nice transition between the commercial uses to the west and in the downtown to the more residential uses that are to the east and to the south. Bergen has an early childhood care facility that's about a block and a half to the south. And Trinity's childcare facility is also a couple blocks to the south. And then the Episcopal, whatever the church is just across the street from us, their child facility is immediately to the north. So it provides a nice concentration of childcare facilities that are near schools and also in an area where there is a need for childcare. Under the UDC, childcare centers are permitted as conditional uses as long as they have adequate off-street circulation, drop-off and parking, and this site does. There will be 3 drop-off spaces in the driveway itself for the facility, and then the city parking lot behind it to the southwest will provide parking for staff. The primary access to the street is from a collector road. It's a one-way street that provides circulation through the downtown area. It's not shown as a collector on our functional classification map. However, it serves that way in providing transportation on the street through the downtown. Sixth Street is one way to the east and Fifth Street is one way to the west. There will be up to, I believe, 40 children, up to 48 infants and children with 10 staff at any given time. The playground area will be located in the back. Building permits are required for interior authorizations and a state license is required prior to commencing operations. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 7th. It had been held over from the August 21st Planning Commission meeting due to issues with the public notice, and the Planning Commission voted 7-0 to recommend approval to this conditional use permit. I would be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for staff on this item? Okay, thank you. I'll now open the public hearing on this item. Any comments from the public?
Hi, my name is Myra Catherine, and I think this is the 3rd time I've been before you in the past 5 years. So we started out with our LB 840 loan, and this month wrote our very last check back to the city. So we're pretty excited about that. We have a saying that everybody needs somebody that needs childcare. So whether you have littles at home or you're actively raising a family, we all need somebody who needs childcare. Currently, there are 900 children on the wait list in Dodge County alone for childcare. By us vacating Stonebridge Church and taking possession of 445 East 5th Street, Stonebridge plans to open their own childcare facility, which would open up about 80 spots. So we're just a little knock in the chink towards that 900. And I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you. Any additional comments from the public on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Councilwoman Ganem.
I will abstain on this one since it's my son who is working on the sales of this.
Additional comments from council? Okay, if there are none, I would take a motion. Councilman Sukram,
I'll make the motion to approve resolution, excuse me, 2023-214.
Councilman Vaughn,
I will second.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 5-0 with one abstention, Mayor.
Moving on to item 3 is ordinance 5654 on behalf of Apple D Acres for a change of zone from R rural to LI light industrial on property generally described as tax lot 101, generally located at the northeast corner of Prairie Road and Judy Drive, Dodge County, Nebraska.
Good evening, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request for a change of zone to light industrial. It is associated with a request for a conditional use permit for a self-storage facility. That conditional use permit will be at the next council meeting. The applicant thought they would have all of their grading information put together in time for this meeting, but they didn't. So they'll be bringing it when we have the second reading of this particular ordinance. The comprehensive plan designates this area for a flex commercial or heavy commercial type space in the future. Light industrial is consistent with that type of zoning and the adjacent zoning uses. The area to the east and to the south are zoned LI light industrial. The property to the west is zoned R rural, and to the north is suburban residential. The property is in the floodplain, and so we want to make sure that it drains properly. They have proposed a rather large detention cell on the property. You'll see that next week. And they're making sure with their engineers that all of the drainage works so that it doesn't impact any of the neighbors adversely. The Planning Commission recommended approval to this, and we request that you hold first reading.
Thank you. Any questions from the council on this item? Thank you. I'll open the public hearing on this item. Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Additional comments from council? If there are none, this would be first reading. I'd take a motion. Councilman Vaughn,
Motion to hold for first reading.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
We'll have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending ordinance number 5427 as it pertains to the zoning map to rezone the property generally located at the northeast corner of Judy Road and Prairie Road, legally described as tax lot 101, located in the southwest quarter of section 2, township 17, north range east of the 6 p.m. Dodge County, Nebraska, from R rural to LI light industrial, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on first reading.
Moving on to item 4 is resolution 2023-216, granting permission to apply for community development block grant downtown revitalization funding and authorizing the mayor to sign the necessary documents.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Staff would like to apply for community development block grants for downtown revitalization. And the city's comp plan includes downtown revitalization plans. So it is a good fit with the comp plan. City staff, along with the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District, and in partnership with Main Street, met with downtown area business owners. The chamber also attended and was there to translate. And we found out there's a lot of interest in this program, and the funds would be utilized for facade improvements for downtown area businesses at a 25% match for the business. And then the rest would be utilizing the grant funds. And we also did a survey as well, which also showed that there's a lot of interest in this program from downtown businesses. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff on this item? Councilman Vaughn.
So these funds would be limited to the facades only and nothing as far as the structural or interior.
That's correct. And that is a part of the grant. We don't get to decide that it is just for the facade. There are some instances where if the alleyway is your primary entrance to your business, then that could be considered facade. But yes, it's just for the facade.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing on this item. Seeing no comments from the public, I'll close the public hearing. Additional comments from council. And if there are none, I would take a motion. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2023-216.
Councilman Vaughn. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda, all items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by council or staff? Okay. Seeing none, any items from the public to be removed? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, Councilman Von Baron.
Second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Okay, now moving on, item 22 is resolution 2023-226, approving the 2023-2025 collective bargaining agreement between the city of Fremont and the Fraternal Order of Police, local number 37, as negotiated by management.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This is the collective bargaining agreement that we have been working with the FOP, the union that represents our police officers. And this is what we have negotiated with them. Their bargaining unit did approve this 2 weeks ago, I believe, so it has been approved. The only thing left is your approval. As a staff report indicates, we did do comparability adjustments in year one, and then year two would have a 3% cost of living increase on October 1st and another 2.5% on April 1st of 2025. We expanded the residency requirement to 30 miles from the city limits. We added bilingual pay due to increases in the costs for body armor and uniforms. We did increase those allowances, and then we also removed the post-employment health plan for their sick leave accruals at separation. Instead, if they're eligible for that, that will just get paid out as a cash balance. And that percentage was lowered from 45% to 40%, in part because the city will now be responsible for employer payroll taxes on that payout. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the council on this? Okay. Councilman Vaughn.
Do have one.
That's
The increase in the uniform and body armor allowances. Do you have an estimate like per officer, what we're talking there?
it's less than $10 a month for the monthly uniform allowance. The body armor itself is going up 50%. 2 years ago, we could buy a vest for about $800, and now we're looking at about $1,200. So that did go up quite a bit, but the uniform allowance is It's less than $10. I don't remember the exact amount. And part of that is because they did move to the Molly vests. So that is to help cover the cost for those.
Well, they need them. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion on this item. Councilman Sukram,
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2023-226.
Councilwoman Ganem,
I second the motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Moving on to unfinished business is item 18, ordinance 5651 for approval of utility salary ordinance. This would be for final reading.
Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This is the third and final reading of the utility salary ordinance. One thing is noted in the staff report, there are 2 positions that were added, a lead fuel handler and environmental coordinator. These are not additional headcount. These are reclassification of current positions that we have. We accounted for this in the budget. And I just failed to get it in the first 2 readings on the salary ordinance. So again, they're not additional headcount that we're adding. We're just reclassifying to better fit our needs based on our current operations and the needs of the organization.
Okay. Councilwoman Ganem, did you have a question? Okay. This is final reading on this. Do we have any other comments at this point from council or questions? Okay. Any comments from the public on this item? Okay. If there's no additional comments from council, I would take a motion. This would be to hold final reading ordinance 5651. Councilman Von Baron,
I'd move that we've the rules and move to final reading of ordinance 5651. Sorry about that.
okay, Councilman Sukram,
I will second that.
and this would be to just hold final reading. Yeah, we're at final reading, so if that's the motion, so. Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
I'll have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5633 and all of their ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on final reading.
Okay, cast your final vote.
It's approved 6-0, Mayor.
Item 19 is ordinance 5652 for approval of the government salary ordinance. Again, this would be for final reading.
Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. This is the salary ordinance for the city side of the organization. As mentioned earlier and discussed, this does now include the increases per the approved contract for the FOP bargaining unit. So that has been updated. Otherwise, I don't believe there are any additional changes from the prior readings.
Okay. Again, this is final reading on this. Do you have any comments from council, questions at this point? Councilwoman Ganem.
Well, we've added some positions that aren't reflected in the salary. And so I wondered if you could explain why that would be like for the zoning, the planning.
We're not ready to put a pay grade on it yet. We're still researching.
Okay,
And it's still being discussed.
so then we amend that salary when you're finished
Yes.
that?
Yes, we will bring it back. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Comments from the public on this?
Brad Yerger, 2318 East Fifth Street. Have documents I'd like to receive for the record, please.
Okay, I take a motion to receive. Councilwoman Ganem, your light is on. Okay. Is there a motion to receive the documents? Councilman Von Baron,
I'll make that motion.
is there a second? Councilman Sukram,
I'll make it second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 5-1, Mayor. Thank you.
Go ahead.
What you have before me covers not only this agenda item, but some others, but I wanted to get this in light of the questions that were raised by Councilman Ganem and the statements that were made by staff. I raised this question earlier last week about the zoning administrator position and the fact that it's still not in the ordinance that is before you. Seems troublesome. The explanation was we're not ready. Well, you apparently were ready to put it in the budget because it's been costed and put in the budget. And my concern goes to this way. These positions, when they're new, have to have comparables. I assume that we're going to be using some consultant to do comparables. That's probably some of your questioning, Councilman Ganem, as well as to, well, what will the pay scales be? I assume that work has not been conducted, which is why staff responded the way they did. But it does beg the question as to how you create the budget when you haven't done this work at this juncture. I guess you're creating the budget with an estimate for these job grades. But if you were to turn forward into that agenda item and look at what was estimated and look at what kind of a pay scale that this would potentially take, it might shock you based on the estimates that were put in the budget for this job. So I just call that to your attention because this does need to be a comparable salary for the zoning position that's not there today. Quite honestly, this is probably a position that is necessary and probably should have been there for a while to assist the planning director. There's a lot of work in this area, so I don't quibble with that. Question is, what are you going to pay this particular position? And that's non-existent yet in what you have before you, just as indicated by staff. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion to hold final reading. Ordinance 5652. Councilman Vaughn,
We'll make the motion to hold final reading.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
we're in government salary ordinance right now, so I don't know, we're on item 20 on the board, so we might want to go back on the board. Okay, sorry to make you, yeah, can you please vote again? This is whole final reading.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
We'll have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees repealing ordinance number 5646 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on final reading.
Okay, cast your final vote.
The item is approved 6-0, Mayor.
Okay, moving on, item 20 is ordinance 5653, adopting the 2023-2025 biannual budget statement termed the appropriation bill. So yeah, we are at the final reading of our budget. Again, we've had multiple meetings on this. We had public hearing last week. And again, multiple opportunities to talk about the budget. I'd open it up to council if they have any questions for staff or comments at this point. So. Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, and I brought this up with Jody, but I think one of the things that as I go through this, and I'm just going through this at very high level, but not necessarily challenging what we're doing, but our priorities. We're looking at adding $31 million in new bonding so that we can cover police, fire, and the multi-purpose building at the same time. Given where we are, and I understand we intend to fund them in the order built, so we would put the reserves normally toward the multi-purpose building first. But given where we are with that amount of bonds in what seems to be an uncertain economy, and with probably somewhat of a guarantee of rising interest rates, although my crystal ball remains a little foggy, it seems to me that it's more prudent to utilize reserves as best we can. Police and fire being our primary responsibility. It seems to me that it'd be more prudent to commit our reserve funds to those two structures, even though they're going to be delayed a little bit with design and some of the other considerations. But just some of this is just simple risk management. And so I'm not advocating we slow up police and fire at all. I'm just simply advocating that we consider, first of all, utilizing our reserves toward the police and fire against future bond risk.
Okay, any additional comments from council? Councilman Vaughn?
Yeah, I just think that it's worth, we're saying out loud that this is probably the most exciting list of projects that has been included in a city budget, probably in its history. And there's a lot of awesome stuff that we're finally doing and accomplishing. And I'm proud to see Fremont get this done.
Okay, any other comments from council? Any comments from the public?
Red Yeager, 2318 East Fifth Street. Let me start by saying I do want to commend the mayor and the council for what was articulated as the priorities with regards to budgeting items for this year, that being public safety. That includes police and fire as some high priority items for this city, and paying down, not paying down, but eliminating some of the excess reserves that have been built up through the excess property taxes and rates that the citizens of Fremont have been paying. And we've been sitting on an significant amount of reserves, and utilizing those is a good strategy. But I do have a few concerns in that regard when we talk about we're funding of those bonds, et cetera. One of those being we're going to fund out of sales tax. Again, I think that's probably a good idea, but I raised this question for you to think about. I think I raised it before, but I want to reiterate it again tonight. How much sales tax revenue does the city collect? How much of that, I think it's a 1/3, goes to public safety, police and fire. Another third goes to streets, I think, and the other third goes to economic development. So for those funds that go to public safety, police and fire, if that's a couple $2 million, how much is it going to cost for you to pay principal and interest out of sales tax funds in order to accommodate bonding those? I would caution you to think and find out, if the departments don't know this, how much money they've been spending out of sales tax revenues on a regular annual basis. I believe they fund capital and equipment items out of that today, and probably largely spend close to $2 million already. If that's what you're taking in and you intend to use those for principal and interest repayment, you can't buy equipment and capital costs that the departments are used to either. And has that been fully accommodated? Before you settle on this, I would ask you to take a look at that. The other thing has to do with personnel. We never really heard how much is in the budget for overall personnel related costs and what the percentage increase of the budget is when we give the increases that are being proposed in this budget. It would be interesting if you had heard that and the public had a chance to hear that. It would also be nice to know what the legal costs are. What was, from my look, we're spending about $500,000 on legal expenses. Be interesting to know how much of that was for the Adams and Sullivan law firm versus the Tohig law firm for city prosecutor duties and for all of the others that are included in legal expenses. As you recall, I mentioned an item once before where the Adams and Sullivan contract requires them to adhere to what is budgeted. I haven't heard anybody ask, what did you budget for that? So that you know what the target is on an annual basis. Really be interesting to know what that is. I'm glad to have heard from Councilman Von Baron that there's some issues regards to the use of bonds and the sequence and use of reserves. I would fall in the camp of utilizing those reserves for public safety, just as you articulated, which means use them first for fire or for police. Use them next for fire. Those are the two public safety issues, and use them if there's any left for the multi-use building. Anywhere you run out of funds along the way after the police building, which you can fully fund from reserves, you can commit to bonds. Realizing, of course, that they have to be paid for by the public, either through general obligation bonds or through the sales tax payments that you would collect and pay for in that arena. But I think there's a priority there. You indicated there's a priority. I think the public has a priority. It's public safety, it's police, fire, and maintenance building. If you asked, I think that's the result you'd get. That's not the way you've budgeted it. You've budgeted it maintenance building, police and fire. And I have to ask, I wonder why. Why aren't we doing the police station work first? Then there's the issue of employees and adding in city administrator, assistant city administrator position. As you recall, it was only a little over a year or two ago that we took a job, split it into two. Ultimately ended up paying almost as much for two as we were for one. Excuse me, paying twice as much as what we were for one, being offset by the elimination of the assistant city administrator position, which now you propose to put back. That position was eliminated. We tried to take it out of the ordinance. It wasn't removed. So I encourage you to do the same. Take that out. Don't put that through. Library personnel, I would take those out. So anyway, I just encourage you to take a look at some of those details. I said last time, devil was in the details. These are some of the details I hope you had looked at before you passed this tonight. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, additional comments from council. Councilman Von Baron.
Yeah, just to be on the record, my concern on this is, well, I guess it's order of spending, but obviously when it comes to funding of other projects, if there is a problem with bonding, sales tax revenue drops, that kind of thing, our backstop becomes property taxes. And just in the interest of prudent risk management, I just think it's worth considering that when we already had the reserves available to fund the police station, and yet we're going to looking at taking out an $8 million bond against that. That just seems backwards compared to the long-term planning that it seems that we should be responsible for as a council. So much of my concern is the backstop of property taxes. If that's always a if, but in this economy right now where we are, there are probably more ifs than certainty.
Councilman Vaughn.
I hear the cries for spending on public safety first and foremost, but I would like to remind everybody that the police cars that these officers drive and the ambulances that the EMTs and firefighters drive, all that equipment needs to be serviced somewhere. So this is public safety. It's all a part of being a cohesive, responsible city. This one is up first. We're the most ready to do it. It's the simplest project. It is what it is. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ganem.
Is not true. We just had a fire report not too long ago, and it would take at least a minimum of 2 years to really build fire stations. And we haven't even found another location that, as far as I know yet. So there's a lot of background. We wouldn't even be able to get started we wouldn't even be able to do anything for another year or two. And the same with the police. I think we were just hiring designers for the buildings. And so that's going to take some time. And so I see this as a way to be able to complete some goals. And I wondered if finance could kind of explain why we're doing it or what we're doing as far as financing between the three, please.
Sure. Jody Sanders, City Administrator. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The idea behind spending general fund reserves is to pay for the Parks Department share of the multipurpose building, as well as the city's 50% share of the area that's allocated for fleet maintenance. So again, as mentioned, fire and police, as well as street department and parks vehicles. The idea is that we have these reserves. If we were to not build the street department building at this time, that would only allow us to apply 4.8 million of general fund reserves to the police station. We do not have reserves to completely pay for the police station at a $17 million price tag. During the last budget cycle, I was asked to find $10 million in reserves, and we did that. But we can't fund 17.5 million out of reserves. So the 4.8 million is not going to be enough to make sure that we don't have to bond anything for the police department. The rest of the money is coming from the utilities, which cannot be spent for public safety, as well as gas tax, that too cannot be used for public safety. So that switch, we're still going to be issuing bonds. When issuing bonds, there is a certain cost beyond just the interest. You have the issuance costs, which can be significant when we go through this process. My thought process on all of this was to spend down reserves to the extent that we feel comfortable, as we feel comfortable. And again, I mentioned in an email to council, with your direction, the idea is that by the time we're ready to issue bonds, we will know exactly how much we have left in reserves for both the general fund and the public safety sales tax piece. And so we'll know, can we afford to spend a little bit more in reserves if need be, to reduce the amount that we would bond. Waiting until, spending reserves in other ways and perhaps having to issue bonds earlier. The crystal balls that I've been listening to talk about very likely will be heading into not necessarily by any means a recession, but a correction is what it's being termed as, meaning interest rates will not stay at these high levels, and that they should be receding over the next couple of years. We're looking at not needing to issue bonds until the fiscal year 2025 at this point by spending the reserves as I've outlined. Does that help? Are there other questions?
Councilman Sukram.
And Jody, we went through a lot of meetings to determine how to spend down before we get the bonds, correct?
Yes.
That's what I remember anyway. And so public safety bonds, if they come about, are pretty normal if you need to go above and beyond what you need to spend.
Correct.
So, yeah.
They're actually called municipal improvement bonds. Public safety bonds would incur an additional property tax on residents, and that would not be our approach. We're considering issuing municipal improvement bonds, which would be paid back through the sales tax that we already collect.
Okay. Any other questions from council? If there are none, I would take a motion to have this as final reading. Councilman Vaughn,
Make the motion to hold final reading.
Councilman Sukram. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
We'll have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska to adopt the budget statement to be termed the appropriation bill to appropriate sums for necessary expenses and liabilities and to provide an effective date on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
Ordinance is approved 6-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 21 is resolution 2023-228, commitment of general funds for 2023-2025 budget. Staff report on this item.
Kristen Klingsick, Interim Director of Finance. We're asking you to approve the resolution 2023-228, committing the funds for the large capital improvements, which would come out of the general fund. In 2024, we are looking at some items for the UDC, which had already been taxed. And so it would just be a carryover of anything that hadn't already been paid. We have a scale out at the waste transfer station, a portion of the library expansion project, the multi-purpose building, which would again cover the parks, that carries over from 2024 in a little in 2025 as well. There are some projects out at the airport, and then the law enforcement center, which spans both years. So in 2024, we have $7,062,089. In 2025, $2,835,000, which would be the total over the 2 years of $9,897.89. Sorry, 9 million. This also includes the immigration ordinance, just saying we wouldn't spend it for anything else. That would be at council's discretion, and it would not exceed 1.35 million. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kristen. Any questions? Seeing no questions, any comments from the public on this item?
My name is Doug Whitman, 124 County Road M, Dodge, Nebraska. I'm not a Fremont resident anymore, but I love Fremont. I'm part of a group called Win It Back in Fremont, composed of people that love righteous government. Okay, we sometimes they think we're anti-government, but we're not. We're pro righteous government. I heard you mention something about taking the funds from the illegal immigration ordinance and using them for something else besides defending that ordinance. A number of us way back then, if we remember that fight in Fremont, worked toward what we consider kind of law and order and trying to do something with illegal immigration. And then, you know, you guys are probably all familiar with the history of the issue. The council voted 4-4 at one time and had meetings at the high school, and so the ordinance didn't pass, and then some people raised a petition to get it on the ballot, and the people of Fremont voted for it. A couple of years later, the council decided they thought that maybe people had changed their minds, and so they were going to get rid of the ordinance. And of course, a number of the people that worked hard to get it passed spoke up, and they agreed to at least put it back again to the people to vote, to see where people stood. And it was a interesting election that I don't know what the percentages were, but I think more people voted for the ordinance the second time than and then there was the fear of we were going to for sure get sued, right? And so we needed to raise this money to defend the ordinance, and of course the ACLU came true to form and sued the city, but lost, and so the city did not have to pay the fees that they were charging, if I understand all this correctly. Part of our mission in Win It Back is to advance and defend God-given freedom by promoting fiscal responsibility in government. I think that it's fine to take this money away because it appears that it's going to be, it's settled. But I think it should be given back to the people that were forced to put it into that fund. I think that it would be wise and righteous of people in these trying times. Nobody knows what interest rates are going to be. Finance has, that whole thing about, we don't believe that debt leads to freedom. Okay, so I think this money should not be just put from general fund into, I know you'd love that. And maybe a lot of people would love that, to find some money and use it toward projects that are legitimate and such. But some of us feel that that money rightfully should go back to the people that put it in. So to have some honest property tax kind of relief would be, I think, the righteous path. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay.
Name is Gene Schultz. I live at 2306 Gene Drive in Fremont. The reality is we have thousands of unknown illegal aliens crossing the border on a regular basis, and we don't know who they are. All we know is they're coming from many countries. How many wish to do us harm? Where will they end up? We don't know. I assume they will follow the path of least resistance. You've probably heard that the mayor of New York City is not happy with the illegal aliens coming to his city. He says they can't afford to house, feed, and care for them all and educate their kids. Neither could Texas or the other states. That's why they sent them to a self-proclaimed sanctuary city. In Fremont, at least, we have an ordinance that only welcomes legal aliens. Illegals can pass us by. Our ordinance is supposed to see that that happens. At the time, taxes were collected because the city said, if you have this ordinance, you will need funds for the purpose of implementing and defending it. That fund now seems to be in jeopardy. Again, how many times has it been robbed already? Remember the old Johnny Carson routine with Karnak the Magnificent? He would hold an envelope up to his head and say, I can define the answer without having seen the question. It seems what we have here in Fremont, it seems that's what we have here in Fremont. Some Karnaks think they know that the immigration ordinance will never be challenged without knowing what the future might bring. So they want the opportunity to spend other people's money on a future project of their choosing. They either think they are being clever or they are getting desperate. Too many projects proposed, not enough dollars in hand. Well, I have another idea. If you insist on rolling the dice that the ordinance won't need to be defended as time goes by, then let's give the money back to the citizens where it came from. That seems the fair thing to do. Then we won't have to keep playing the shell game where we have to decide which shell is the P under. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah.
My name is Brenda Ray. I live at 1445 North Irving. And I'm getting a little confused as to what's going on about this. I believe that I heard her mention just you guys have the discretion to spend the immigration fund. If so, if that's what I understood correctly, I have to say, I don't believe it should be spent. It needs to be stayed in that fund in case something comes up. I look at it like you put your money in your retirement, and before the government decided that you could borrow from it to buy a house or something else, originally an IRA was said to be in there until you retire. You didn't touch it. I believe the money that's in this ordinance fund needs to stay because number one, I don't trust the ACLU, and having a little money that we can fight them with deters them just a little bit, even though they have billions more than the rest of us. So I don't believe there should be any discretionary spending out of that immigration fund. And if I'm confused, I'm sorry, but thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Councilman Vaughn.
Just in light of what I think is some confusion, Jody, would you mind a little clarification, please?
Sure. The second part of this resolution is asking the council to commit the funds from the immigration ordinance for the defense and enforcement of that. At this time, there's no plan to change anything with the immigration ordinance. That's not the intent of this resolution.
And would it also be fair to say that we are actively capping and setting a determined amount that we're going to keep no matter what at 1.35 million?
Sorry, we put that number there because we can pretty well guess what that number is going to be because we haven't spent anything out of it since the last time that we made a payment to Mr. Kobach. So we know exactly the number. We just round that number up for this purpose. It basically, the resolution says the amount will be determined later, and it will be just like it has been for the last 12 years, shown on our audit as committed for ordinance enforcement.
Thank you.
Councilman Von Baron.
Okay, I'm confused. I think I understand now. So we are not advocating to commit these reserves to general spending. Is that correct? The 1.3 million?
Correct.
Okay, so that stays in the fund.
Yes.
Okay. I think, yeah, given for a long time, this has been considered the third rail of Fremont politics. I think that's probably prudent.
Councilwoman Ganem.
No, and I think when we stopped paying our lawyer a yearly fee, we said that money would be kept toward the defense fund if we ever needed it and not spent. And so I would not be able to ever support moving the intent of that funding to something else at this time.
Okay, Councilman Von Baron.
Can I just follow up? I do have a document that I'd like to submit to the council. It's pretty simple. It's basically just 2 sentences, but I think it does clear up another item where we've had some statements made regarding.
Okay. Is it gonna take a motion to receive the document? Councilman Sukram.
Make the motion. I'll make the motion.
Okay. No, Councilwoman Ganem.
I'll second.
Okay, cast your votes to receive the document.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Now, the point I'd like to make, it's been alleged several times here that Kobach is not eligible to represent the city of Fremont. So I had contacted them in the past. I'd communicated that verbally to the council, but it keeps being challenged. So I asked him to just give us a simple statement. And just for the public's information, it just says, in response to your question, Kansas law does not prohibit an attorney general from maintaining a private law practice in his personal capacity, nor are there any other constraints preventing me from assisting Fremont in the defense of the immigration ordinance. So I hope that finally makes that issue clear.
Okay, and just to be clear, we are talking about, this is again, the resolution 2023, the commitment of general funds for the budget. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, are there any other comments from council that haven't spoken at this point that would like to? If there aren't, I would take a motion. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make the motion on resolution 2023-228.
Okay, Councilwoman Ganem,
Second the motion.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Item 23 is motion to receive Keene Memorial Library Annual Report updated with the SIPA compliance statement. I have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Laura England Biggs, Director, Keene Memorial Library. As you'll recall, we brought you the initial annual report in January, and we forgot to put the compliance statement in. We do have that for you now. Following our July board meeting, Library Board President Linda McLean had a meeting with the Director of IT and the City Administrator and the Network Administrator to talk about what it takes to be compliant with the Children's Internet Protection Act. And they were able to reassure her that our current practices do meet those standards. And so that's what's before you tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this? Thank you. Comments from the public on this item? Okay. Seeing no comments, additional comments from council. If there are none, I would take a motion. Councilwoman Ganem,
I would move, to accept the report.
Councilman Sukram,
I will second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the executive session to discuss real estate purchase and litigation update. You all should have the language. And cybersecurity. Okay. So I wouldn't need a motion. If you make the motion, just please read the item 1 on your sheet for executive sessions. Councilman Vaughn.
I move to go into executive session for the purpose of a strategy session relating to cybersecurity, real estate matters, and a litigation update, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest.
Okay, Councilman Sukram.
I also.
A motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of a strategy session relating to cybersecurity, real estate matters, and a litigation update, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Is there any discussion from council? Seeing none, the pending motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of a strategy session relating to cybersecurity, real estate matters, and a litigation update, for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Please cast your vote.
Motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
A motion to go into executive session for the purpose of a strategy session relating to cybersecurity, real estate matters, and a litigation update, and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest has been approved. Discussion will be limited to strategy session relating to cybersecurity, real estate matters, and a litigation update. No official actions or votes will be taken during the executive session. We will now go back to the back conference room, council, as well as Jeff and Jody, Chris Gunderson, our IT director, Justin Zetterman, our public works director.